Before we begin, since this is a BBC-owned property, I feel the need to point out that the news arm of the BBC has a continuing issue with transphobic leanings in its news coverage. You can find in a pinned comment below various videos from both myself and other YouTubers covering this issue. And while I understand that the Doctor Who creative team is not responsible for this, I will continue to point this out for as long as it remains a consistent issue. Thank you. One more time. The last Take Two Doctor Who review for the foreseeable future. I've mentioned that I am not going to have cause to do second visitations to Doctor Who stuff for a very long time. So this will serve, for now at least, as the end of this series, which was a continuation of the overdue Doctor Who reviews, where I took a look at episodes that I had seen, but I had watched prior to having the channel, so I hadn't done reviews on them yet. This is, I guess, the end of an era, end of a follow-up to an era. I don't know. But we need to talk about the power of the Doctor. An episode that isn't even all that old. It's less than a year old. But you know what? I was happy to revisit it. I had a lot of fun with this when it aired. I remember thinking, I'm not sure how much scrutiny this holds up to, if any, but I am having fun. And going in, knowing that it was going to leave a lot of threads untied, most of them. In fact, I actually might have enjoyed this even more the second time. I enjoyed it pretty well because I kind of given up on Chibnall tying up anything at that point, and I was right to have that sense. But coming in for a second time and knowing for a fact as opposed to strongly suspecting, I could kind of just roll with this for what it is. And what it is a celebration. Not only of this era of the Doctor, but of previous eras as well, with all of the companions that come back, the multiple classic era Doctors who come back. Is it a bit of a cheap trick? Yeah. That doesn't mean it doesn't work, though. Here's the thing. I think this is not only a good finish to a Doctor's era, it might even be a great one. It is a true, proper celebration of this era. The only thing is that what it's celebrating isn't something that I have always cared for. Yet the celebration itself is still quite good. For lack of a better analogy, it's like going to a really great party that's being thrown in honor of somebody you don't actually get along with. But like, the party's great and you're having fun, but you also know you'd probably be having even more fun if you actually got along with this person consistently at all. That's basically where I am with this. So when you have things like Ashad coming back, or Vinder coming back, or the Fugitive Doctor for that matter, they're basically only one or a couple of scenes apiece. It's largely fan service. They don't really need to be there for the sake of the plot. In the case of somebody like Ashad, like, he definitely doesn't need to be there. Vinder doesn't do anything, just kind of shows up. The Fugitive Doctor is more of a nod than anything, but I enjoy their presence, and I largely because of just the feel. They're there in the spirit of remember all the fun we've had across this series. And the only thing that makes this not work as well as it might have otherwise is I can look at somebody like Ashad and go, right, great design, great performance, and you kind of wasted him last time too. But that's not really the fault of this episode. If I had enjoyed more of the Whittaker Chibnall era, this would be almost perfect. Now that's in terms of enjoyment. And I do honestly often feel like final episodes aren't required to be, but for me, they do tend to work well when they are celebratory. It is one of the things that I enjoy, honestly, more about Journey's End than The End of Time Part 2, because Journey's End felt like more of a celebration of Russell T Davies' era than End of Time did. But this feels like a big celebration of the era. And I just like that. You can argue it's a victory lap. You can argue all the plot logistics and stuff that doesn't make sense, or stuff like, how does that even work? Or why would you do it that way? And I'm not going to say that you're wrong to bring any of that up or that it fits together neatly. It doesn't. I just kind of don't care. And like, if you've been following the series, you know that I'm generally not one to just go, it doesn't matter as long as it's fun. No, if it bugs me, it matters, whether it's big or small or preposterously petty, which I absolutely can be. But it just all doesn't seem to matter here. I enjoy this ride. And I think it uses its time well. I think it has a lot of fun. It has some interesting ideas that honestly are a little rushed, could have been expanded, and or don't make a total amount of sense. But it never lets up. And that's the thing. This is the kind of story where if it slowed down or lost momentum for even a minute, it would all fall apart. It is powered forward on enthusiasm, which it has in abundance. And for me, at least, that kind of papers over the flaws. Going through the thing, we have our cold open, reestablishing the Time Lord-infused Cybermen. I think they call themselves the Cyber Masters. And also, like, setting up for the exit of Dan, which is a little rushed, to be completely honest. He does still get some cute little moments, like when he does the train announcer voice. I actually quite like that.
Everything is under control, and we will be slowing to a gentle stop momentarily.
But then he's just like, I think I'm done. And, I mean, yeah. It is a little rushed, but I think this final stretch should be just the Doctor and Yaz. Honestly, a lot more of the show prior to this should have been just the Doctor and Yaz, but better late than never, I suppose. We get our old companions coming back, starting with Tegan and Ace. Now, I adore Ace. Ace and Seven are one of my favorite pairings. I also really like Tegan. I've come to like Tegan more the more I've seen of her. The Fifth Doctor is not a Doctor I've particularly gotten on well with, but there are good things about his era, and I do think Tegan is one of them. So her attitude, especially towards the Doctor...
How have you been?
Like you care.
Tegan, we discussed this.
38 years.
Pretty well earned. I can be iffy about the companions seeming bitter or resentful or like, you abandoned us, that kind of thing. Tegan... Yeah, no, with Tegan, she's got good reason to hold a fair bit of stuff against the Doctor. So it's way more justified with her than when it's kind of been pulled or hinted at in other instances. So that works out okay. And even though I'm not a huge fan of the Fifth Doctor, her reunion scene with him, it works.
What? I missed you.
Missed you too.
It's good. And if that's good, then the scene with the Seventh Doctor and Ace is phenomenal.
We're good.
Oh, we're more than good. We're Ace.
Ace, bring up the Nitro 9, the souped up Nitro 9 now. Man, like, oh, well, it's always okay when I blow things up. And
It's never fine to blow stuff up. Sometimes, sadly, it's the only solution.
First of all, agree with the sentiment. Second of all, just the care in his voice.
All children leave home sooner or later. The joy is to watch them fly.
And we don't totally know what it is that went down between them that's kind of implied by this interaction, but this is just beautiful. And just the general idea of that sort of liminal space where the Doctor hasn't fully regenerated, hasn't fully crossed over yet, where she encounters the First Doctor, the Fifth, the Sixth, the Seventh, the Eighth. Like, it was just a fun group, and it was well done. It just shifts between them, and it's simple, it's straightforward, but It works, even knowing that it's there, when it's not a surprise anymore, when I'm not going to get a big, pop from it. Just seeing it, I'm like, oh, I still like this a lot. The regeneration. Now that's kicked off by the Master. It's a forced regeneration. Now, Dewan is doing what he has done. He is bringing that manic energy to it, and he's still doing it quite well. They bring back sort of the hypnotic thing, like just with the eyes that the Master can do. His love of disguises as he is passing himself off as Rasputin. I think I had asked when I watched this originally, like, wait, are they implying he's always been Rasputin or he took over Rasputin's life? I'm assuming he took his place because Master loves disguises. This one has done that. The John Sim Master did that. Like, it's been reestablished. Let him have his fun. You know, let him dance. The thing is, this is the episode that actually kind of solidified initially something that I've noted in my rewatch that I really like about this particular Master, and is the one reason I would be okay with him coming after Missy, because like it's a fairly common debate amongst fans. Does this Master come after Missy? And if he does, doesn't that undermine her character arc? Because the Master's just gone back to being bad. Well, here's the thing in my mind. With the self-loathing streak that he very clearly has, solidified for me in that moment where what he did to the Doctor is being reversed, and he just says, almost pleading,
Don't let me go back to being me.
that self-loathing to me can work with someone who tried to change, wanted to change, but then couldn't, who backslid, who couldn't live up to who they almost were. Self-loathing makes a lot of sense to me. Self-loathing isn't really a thing the Master has as a general rule. But for a Master following on from Missy, who has slipped back into his worst behaviors, I think self-loathing fits. And it also plasters over some problems because his plan in many ways is nonsensical. Because, like, he takes over the Doctor's body, but, like, it's still him. It looks like him. It talks to him. It acts like him. You know, he goes out in space and he's like, I'm the Doctor and I did this. I'm going to ruin the Doctor's reputation. Like, dude, the Doctor keeps changing faces. You could have just claimed to be the Doctor at any point. Like, this plan doesn't make sense. No, logistically, practically, it doesn't. But from the perspective of someone who is so desperate to be anybody other than himself, even in a way that is ultimately skin deep, someone who is desperately trying to run away from their own life, their own screw-ups, these are the kind of choices made by a desperate person who can't think of how else to abandon everything they see as wrong with themselves. And yeah, no, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't need to. The goal is to get out of himself. And this will do that. Will it fix his problems? No. But I don't think it matters. He's going to try whatever he can think of. This is what he thought of. This is what he's trying. And I think if it hadn't been undone, if he had quote unquote succeeded, he would have been just as miserable within a, year tops. But he's grasping at whatever he can if he thinks it'll free him from himself. I've come to appreciate Dewan's Master even more on this rewatch, and he was already one of the highlights of this era for me. So, yeah, I like him a lot. I did mention there's some somewhat throwaway stuff that honestly could have done with more fleshing out. A good example of that is the traitor Dalek, because the thought process of this Dalek is actually quite fascinating. This idea that it's gone back to the original purpose of the Daleks, to preserve the Khaled race, but the Daleks aren't the Khaleds. They haven't been for a very long time, and they're not ever going to try and restore themselves to that state. And so by holding on to the original mission statement, it's prepared to betray the rest of the Daleks. And that's pretty interesting. That could have been the starting premise for an entire episode. It's a minor subplot and the thing gets killed. So one could argue it's a little bit of a waste of the idea, I suppose. In some ways, analogous to the Rogue Angel was a really cool idea, not fully utilized and a little bit wasted in Village of the Angels, but I still kind of like it. I suppose if you were to give me absolute control, I'd say let's pin that idea, let somebody else pick it up later and do an entire episode with it rather than it get burned off here. But it's still well presented and it's an interesting idea. I would have liked if more had been done with it, but it is what it is, and I do kind of like it. I rather like the idea of the weird, I can't think of anything other than the sun tentacle monster. Like, I like the general idea that, like, it's this weird, strange, bizarre alien thing that appears as a child because it will instill the protective instinct in most things around it. So, like, that's kind of a cool idea unto itself. It's kind of a cosmic horror idea, except this thing is not particularly dangerous. I don't understand exactly why at the end the master is able to redirect its beam that it's destroying the cyber moon with and direct it at the Doctor. However, there is an aspect to that I do like, which is the thing is shooting this destructive beam at the Doctor's prompting because the Doctor told it to do this so that it could be free. And ultimately, that is what is going to kill her and cause her regeneration. And it is slightly less direct, but kind of in the spirit of the 10th Doctor sacrificing himself for Wilf. Now, the 13th Doctor didn't know she was going to die, but dying as a result of something that she did or told someone or something to do in order to give it freedom, it's kind of poetic. There's the scene with Yaz, where it's just the two of them with the ice cream. I actually really like that scene. I think I kind of liked it before. I like it quite a bit now, and it actually rhymes extremely well with the scene from Legend of the Sea Devils, which was one of the few, like, legitimately really good scenes from that special. Whereas before, the Doctor was very clinging to things as they were, you know, not wanting it to change, and in that case, acknowledging potentially her feelings for Yaz. Here, she knows she can't cling to it anymore. It's going to end, and it's going to end very soon. And there's a shift in tone, despite the scene superficially bearing a lot of similarities. And they just fit together in a way, it feels like two halves of a conversation.
But if I do fix myself to somebody, I know sooner or later it'll hurt. A wise person once said to me, goodbye's only hurt because what came before was so special.
The thing where the Doctor just kind of says, I think I need to do this next part alone, I've gone back and forth on it.
I think I need to do this next bit alone.
I've said in the past that if there was any Doctor who was going to say, I need to be alone, it was going to be this one. She's been the most distanced from her companions. She has, not made the same strong connections with individuals, and she just has been more isolated. So I do buy that. But thinking on it, while it works, and I'm not going to say like it fails as a concept, ultimately, I think it would have been nicer for her not to send Yaz away, because that would have been an arc for her. Because I think the Doctor would have sent her away at pretty much any point prior to this. For her to choose instead to have her stay would have been more fitting. That's not to say Yaz had to stay. Yaz could have made the decision like, I can't. Like, I don't have it in me to watch you change. You said before that the loss would hurt you. This would hurt me too much. Like, you could find some reason to still have her not be there and have the Doctor be alone, because Mandip Gill didn't sign on for more stuff, so she wasn't going to be the companion going forward. You have to remove her one way or another, and thankfully it's not death or anything like that this time. I still like the support group thing. Like, it's an excuse just to bring in a ton of cameos, and I don't care. It's a gorgeous, wonderful, thoughtful, kind, sweet excuse to bring in a hell of a lot of cameos. So that works for me. Little throwaway moment. There's a nice line I like from the Doctor where she says,
Never happier than when I'm fixing things.
I just like that. I like that as a sentiment for her. And I think that fits. That actually might work as the best summation for her. Like, she needs to be busy. This is, I think, part of why she didn't bond as well with the companions. She can't just settle. Like, the Doctor is restless energy regardless, but this Doctor in particular has a problem with just being and always wants something to do, always wants something to focus on, always wants something to fix, because then she doesn't have to think too much about herself. And normally I can get a little bit just kind of stating like a core feature of a character like that, but honestly, given that I have had trouble connecting with her at various points, hearing that was nice and I found it helpful. That line didn't jump out at me the first time. It jumped out to me this time. And I think it helps for me to appreciate what her take and her version of the character was a bit better than I have. Because I've gone all over the place with my thoughts on her. But no, I like that line. And I very much like how she ends. I like the idea that she wants to see one last sunrise. I like that her big regret is that she doesn't know what'll happen next and she wants to find out. And I absolutely adore
Tag. You're it.
Absolutely love it. I'm not really going to talk about the Tenant regeneration. I've done complete separate videos on that as a concept, and that's not what I want to focus on here. I will have more thoughts on whether or not that's a good idea when we actually see those specials. In terms of her actual last words, they're right up there. They're some of the best. As I said, this is a really excellent celebratory finale for this era. And the only reason that I don't love it more is that it's celebrating something that I have a lot of problems with. But as the capper, and like certainly for anyone who did enjoy this run more than I did, I would imagine, like, I didn't even enjoy this run that much. And I still think this is great. I can only imagine how hard this hits if you did enjoy this run. Power of the Doctor. Have you rewatched it lately? What'd you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living. Take Two Doctor Who reviews are over for the time being. That does mean that there won't be Wednesday videos for a bit. But at least not as a planned thing that might pop up, because if something happens midweek, timing-wise, it might be easier for me to drop something on a Wednesday than to bump Saturday stuff. I don't know. We'll see, but it's not going to be a regular feature anymore. I have way too much stuff to catch up on. Don't worry too much about that, my schedule, any of it. What I really want you to remember is what I always want you to remember. That you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, tag, you're it. And now my thanks to my Patreon supporters that make this possible, including Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Ruth, Oliver B., Solitary Pictures, Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Jen, T. Love, Auntie Kate 808, Pranabi Likes the Poodle, Robin Powell, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Adam RDL Taylor, Dave Hall, Shayla Gourlay, and Rosalind Bennett. You can get I get all the names right and then I can't talk. If you want to hear me stumble over my tongue after saying your name, it's in the rewards here on the Patreon.